well as supporting our other public safety agencies around the Central Texas region. Lots of special events, from big music events to college football to Formula One racing, kind of a mixture of all the above. Happy to be here.
Excellent. Good to see you, Chris. Thanks for being here. All right, working down the line, David Spraggs. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it. My name is David Spraggs. I'm the manager of customer success for DroneSense and retired detective sergeant from the city of Boulder Police here in Boulder, Colorado. Wore a lot of different hats in my career, patrol investigations. I was a bomb tech for 13 years. And during that time, I was asked to start our drone program with the city of Boulder Police back in 2016. And I love to tell this story. I'm all about not reinventing the wheel. So I did a quick internet search of public safety UAS programs, immediately came across the Austin RED program, the Robotics Emergency Deployment, called down there to ask if they would share their documentation. And the gentleman that I spoke to, I'm positive it was you, my friend, is on this call, and we get to be coworkers and friends today. But again, this is a community, and we're just going to talk about that later today as we talk about the subject and the topic of this webinar. But I'm absolutely thrilled to be here. Thanks, Joe.
Of course, Dave, thanks for being here. All right, and a new addition today, Brad, would you mind introducing yourself?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Brad Whirl. I'm with the Fairfax County Police Department in the Northern Virginia area. We are a suburb of Washington, D.C. I've been with our program since about 2019 when it started going live. I was in crime scene actually at the time, so that's my background. When our chief decided that they needed a full-time program, I was pulled out of investigations and started to head up this program. I've been in a number of large operations, whether it's dynamic ongoing operations that we're getting called out for, or for a couple of pre-planned operations. And one unique aspect to our program is that we are under the same roof and work together with our helicopter personnel. So we have helicopter pilots that are also on our drone team, and we work together with them with some of these operations. Thanks for the invite.
Boris Bradwell, and thank you so much for being here. Well, excellent. Well, you're all subject matter experts in this field, and all in unique, special circumstances. So it's great to have everyone with this webinar. We're going to be going through and kind of having this as a panel. So everyone's going to be jumping in and speaking to things that relate and so on, and walk through each and every step. So, Hoyt, want to hand that over to you?
Yeah, actually, I just wanted to, we have a special guest that just was able to come on board with us, and that's Chief David Kivett. And wanted to pass the mic over to Chief Kivett. We were able to spend some quality time together in Asheville, North Carolina. So Chief Kivett, Mike's yours.
Hi, David Kivett with the Louisville Fire Department. I'm Assistant Chief here. Been a member of DroneSense since 2019. And like Coit mentioned, recently got to participate with the rest of the DroneSense team in Asheville for deployment. And it was a rather large scale event. So however I can help.
Thanks, Chief. Sorry, Joe.
Excellent. No, great to have you. This is awesome. It's exactly what we're looking for here today. So agenda, we're going to be walking through. We're going to be going over some basic operation guidelines when it comes to large scale events, talking about certain use cases, and then we'll open this up to Q&A. And just to also speak to everyone here again, if you do have any questions you'd like for us to review or answer, we'd love to do that live. There's a little Q&A button at the bottom. Please use that, and we'll be able to navigate that and so on. Excellent. Well, let's go to the next slide here. So, basic operating guidelines. They're always the same? Is that the case? Kind of want to open this up. We had a great discussion, David, Coit, and I, kind of talking about this. And one of the big parts is don't try to reinvent the wheel. So kind of want to hand this over to both Coit and Dave to kind of get this started.
Hey, Dave, I'm happy to jump in on this one if you're good with it. So, guys, talking about large scale events, I think that, with this new technology, we're looking at trying to take, we're looking at it just as it said, it's new technology. But the processes that we have for running large scale events, and that's what you guys are here for, is the same. It's the same thing. It's just a different tool that's coming out of the off the shelf or out of the bag, or it's getting put into place. So, I think that's a really big part of us moving forward into 2025 and beyond is making sure that we're not trying to recreate something. Our processes are in place. We know when we show up with mutual aid or automatic aid. We run with our neighbors. We communicate together. So as we go through some of these bullet points, and I know everybody else on the webinar is going to help add to this, is I would just like to say that I really think that if we go into the future thinking, hey, this is just a tool and we are just going to plug it into the way that we've done everything else, we win. If you go in and try to change everything up and you try to make it a totally different system, it's tough. So Joe, that's just kind of the way I wanted to open it up, was just don't, as you said, don't reinvent the wheel, man. Just plug it in the way you've plugged everything else in the past.
Excellent. And it is just about simplifying this in a way too, even though it might be just a large scale, large, big event, just like you were saying. Yeah, it's very, very simple in the way to look at it. So let's go through each of these points. I kind of want to open this up for everyone here. Coy, David, I'd love for you guys to kind of guide on this. Let's go into defining the event.
Yeah, you bet, Joe. I'll hop in on this. So as we had our pre-planning meeting yesterday, we're talking about, use cases, what kind of events would be considered a large scale event. And the first thing I want to say is, again, for my community here in Boulder, Colorado, we're a 25 square miles, a city of 100,000 people. A University of Colorado game was a really big event for us. Or we had the Boulder road race, kind of a world famous 10K road race, as you know, Joe, being from this area as well. So these were our large scale events. Now, when I participated with Coit and Matt at the Indianapolis 500 this year, again, kind of a small town guy in a really big space, that was an eye opener to me to see the scope and the scale of the pre-planning that went into this event. But as Coit stated, right, the basic tenets were the same. Everything just worked. And so as you think about the event, you want to think about, as we come into this kind of concept, as Coit would say, of the mission ready package. How many people do we need? How much hardware do we need? How many batteries do we need? What's the plan? What's the backup plan for power, for internet, for batteries? All of these things. It's just this concept of pre-planning based on the specific situation that you're going to be in. And this is the great thing. We're talking about a pre-planned event, right? So the ball is in your court to make it a great experience for your team.
Excellent. Coy, you shared like kind of some documentation of what it looks like going into these. Could you elaborate on that?
As far as like a mission ready package or
Yeah.
So not a new concept for us. Mission ready packages are something that we go out the door for other deployments. So the other guys on this call right now, when they go out to, Chris Lester, he goes out on a boat team assignment. He has a mission ready package for his team. He knows this is what he needs to pack out to make sure that he's sustainable for X period of time, X amount of time. And as Dave is saying, is we need to be able to have a plan going into this, and it's no different than anything else we do, guys. I mean, again, this is the beauty of this, is that if we just make this basic, it's not it simplifies everything the way that it should be. This does not have to be complicated. Just take what you're used to doing and then plug this tool into it. Where would you like to go from here, on the airspace or team?
Excellent. Well, let's go ahead and just walk through each of these points. So define the event. What is the airspace? Who's on the team? How do you communicate with your team and others? Starting to plan the event, backup and so on, being prepared with the equipment. So let's walk through each of these, and then gentlemen, love for you guys to open up if there's something that can relate to a experience you've had in your agency or a situation that has arisen. Would love to kind of understand that more. So let's walk into what is the airspace. Let me hand that one to you, Dave.
Yep, that's great. Appreciate that. So this is, again, the basic concept of the pre-planning of the event. We need to understand where do we want to fly, and very specifically, Is it controlled airspace? Is it class B, C, D? Is there, and more importantly, for a lot of these special events, if there are dignitaries, if it's a major sporting event like NFL, that there's going to be a TFR or temporary flight restriction in place? And does your team have, I guess, the knowledge and the tools to understand how to get airspace authorization through, let's say, the SGI process, the special governmental interest group as well, and just making sure that you understand that process of having that SGI number programmed into your phone. But this is really about collaboration, because chances are higher than not that you will be collaborating with other people, whether they're federal partners, state partners. And again, this is part of the pre-planning of the operation to really understand the airspace and the steps to take to fly legally and have authority to operate in that airspace.
Great. Now I want to hand this to Matt Roland. Experiences here in Fort Wayne. What would you say here?
I want to just make one point on the airspace. We had a VIP at the airport, and the nice thing about the airport here is that they have their own COA that we were able to fly under. So it took a lot of the planning on our end out by being able to use that. That was one of the points I wanted to make on airspace. For the most part, our stuff that we do when we do our event in the summer is not in any class airspace. So, but we do operate with a helicopter. So we communicate with them on where they're going to fly. And I know someone else said they have a lot more experience with helicopter operations. We don't have that every day on a normal basis. So we work with them during our big event during the summer. So we know where the pilot's going to fly, the approximate route. We didn't do it this year, but next year we've already talked to them about putting MSAT on the phone so that we can track the helicopter live in DroneSense. We've already talked to them about doing that for next year's event.
Excellent. Now let's talk further on, say, who's the team? Needing clear team assignments. Now, I remember we were walking through this, Coit and David, we were talking about, it looks like very particular teams, where they're located, or it's just very simple. Like, what would you go there?
So, Joe, do you mind, may I go back to Matt's?
Of course.
Space. So Matt brings up a great point of, again, one of the DroneSense superpowers. Matt had mentioned MSAT, this mobile streaming and tracking, where you can essentially download the DroneSense application, Android or iOS. And from that DroneSense app with the mobile streaming and tracking, you can share video, you can share the location of this mobile device. And so how customers are using this in the crewed aviation space, and really specifically helicopters, because their altitude is low enough to generally be within the cellular network, which would be required to feed the location back into Operations Hub on the web. But again, we want to deconflict the airspace. I mean, all of these special events need to be through the lens of safety. Safety is absolutely paramount. And so it's really neat to see these instances where we have customers, and listen, we're able to take the feed from shot over, I still want to call it Churchill Navigation. They're based out of Boulder, Colorado, but shot over whatever system they're using in that helicopter. There's generally an HDMI out. We can take that HDMI feed with an Android device, capture the video from that helicopter gimbaled camera. In addition to that, we can feed that into Operations Hub, but also share the location of the helicopter in Ops Hub as well. So you have a record of crewed aviation in your area of operations, plus the uncrewed. So that is an incredible, again, safety value, right? To have that single kind of piece of pane of glass, or this common operating picture, to be able to bring in the crewed and uncrewed assets together.
So you're telling me that there's a way to look at the Operations Hub and be able to see helicopters, men on the ground, men, women on the ground, drones, all different things in one?
Absolutely. Yes, there is.
Excellent. Now that's really interesting. Now let's get, I was working to talk about who's like on the team when it comes to this, and it comes to these basic operating guidelines and such. So we had talked about this. Dave, could you expand a little bit more on there?
I've got
No,
it.
thank you, Coit.
Yeah, I can tee that one up real quick. I had a mentor. I worked at the State Operations Center here in the state of Texas. I was a UAS coordinator for a number of years, and I just had it beaten in my head every time I'd show up at the Operations Center. Who's on the team? Who do we have on the team? Who's wearing what jersey? What are the jobs? And then we move forward. I'm going to punt this one over to Chief Kivett. Just getting back from North Carolina, I think Chief Kivett's probably got a lot of good wisdom on developing the team and understanding who's on it, what their capabilities are. Chief Kivett, ball's yours.
Thank you, sir. So, when we got into Asheville, we really worked with the Asheville PD to kind of figure out what their needs were. We had a 3-person team that we went in with, and we tried to figure out how to best utilize that team. We ended up with one person serving as our air boss to look after the management of our airspace, which we just talked about, airspace. Then we had another that was kind of the manager, I guess, project manager. He kind of managed all the missions that we were going on, all the events that we were going to be taking care of, assigning out those tasks. And then our third person was kind of our tech person that actually went out in the field. One of the things that we found in Asheville was we had about 10 or 11 teams come in to help us out, but only 3 or 4 were actually on DroneSense. So we had a really quick opportunity to spin those people up on DroneSense so that we could get their data feeds, track where they were at, utilize them to the best of our ability. So it was kind of a 3-person team coming in. If all your folks are already trained on DroneSense, you can probably get by with a 2-person team. Just from a management standpoint, that does not take into account what each team itself is doing, whether they're flying with 1 person, 2 people, what all they're handling on that part. And in the background, we have some data management people that were handling our data that was coming in from the event to save down the data to create maps for us. So a lot of the things we dynamically try to figure out. I mean, I think the big events that you guys have already done, like the Indy 500 and things like that, you probably all have various assignments that you want those people to do. So it's kind of, I think, probably all fitting in the same mold is my guess.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of cross-agency collaboration that occurs with this, and as well as you mentioned some people that weren't on DroneSense but were able to maybe have a magic video link shared to them to even be a part of this. That's really interesting.
Yeah, not only did they have the magic video link, I mean, we spun them up on DroneSense. I mean, we brought teams in that had never flown with DroneSense before, and actually, 45 minutes of training got them up so that they were able to stream us data back. So they did. The team did really good making that happen.
Sounds like an easy platform to get spun up on and get to know. It's again back to that, make it simple and not reinvent the wheel, and make it easy to use. So it's great to hear there. Now, anyone else have an experience when it comes to, pre-planning with your team members that we'd like to speak on?
Joe, I'll just hop in really quickly and listen as we live on these scenes. Listen, everybody wants to fly. Everybody wants to be on the sticks, right? And what we found is we really tried to rotate positions. We wanted people, to have really deep experience in all of the different positions, whether it was payload operator or sensor operator, whatever you would call that, the RPIC, the visual observer, the data specialist, the air boss, all these different things. And just, again, just think about the overall development and building that team. So if you've got one person out that would be like your specialist or the RPIC and they're not available, that you want to have that expertise, like really the team should be well-rounded and balanced, was something that we had found. And that's sometimes hard to do, but I just wanted to make that point that I think it's so important to give everybody the experience to run all the different positions.
Now, what's it like with coordinating everyone in that scenario? What does the communication look like between like all the on ground public safety personnel, or in air? What's the communication like?
I'd kick that over to Chris Lester. Chris does a lot of large scale events here in Central Texas. Chris, you wanna jump in on that one, bud?
Yeah, I think the gist of it is starting way before these events happen, right? So if you're working multi-agency events like we do a lot, we bring in Austin Fire Department, Austin Police Department, Texas Department of Public Safety. We all work together on these events all the time. So I think what helps make those things successful is the training that we do together before these events. So we all speak the same language. We all trust each other that can fly, and not just me and AFD's program manager, but all of pilots. I know that everybody's held to the same standard that I hold my pilots to and what positions they could hold. So if it's just myself and, the entire team from Austin Fire Department or vice versa, we all feel comfortable with that because we practice together, we train together. And so when these big events happen, it's just a seamless integration of another day of training, if you will. And we work on these things together. We might split up who's building out the profile with inside DroneSense, who's getting the TFRs, who's getting the waivers. And then we meet up, depending on how big this event is, on a weekly basis to discuss where we are, what kind of hiccups we're having, who can help with something else. It's that team collaboration that really makes these things go off very easily. If one person or a couple of people try to do these large scale events by themselves, that's a full-time job within itself. If you didn't have anything else going on. So that all those things you do beforehand, before those events, building those relationships, practicing, that's what makes this stuff go off without a hitch.
Hey, Brad
Excellent.
Worland, Fairfax County. I just want to echo what all the panelists said, but more particularly what Chris just said. When you're pre-planning for events, it has to start a long time in advance. We were asked for mutual aid for the Marine Corps Marathon, now the second year in a row. And that starts literally months in advance, prepping, getting teams picked out, getting their roles picked out. All of us in the Northern Virginia region do meet regularly, and in some cases, we, like Chris was talking about, we train together. And I can't overstate enough how invaluable that is, knowing who your partners are, being able to communicate with them. The fact that when you're communicating with them, it's not when you're on scene, but in training in advance. And I wanted to basically echo all that.
Excellent, thank you. Now, with all of this, there's a lot of communication here, and I know some of our attendees here are ones that have done a lot of large events or looking to where to get started. Now, NIMS. This is a great moment. Could we elaborate on NIMS to everyone?
I can jump off into this. So NIMS, National Incident Management System, it for a lot of our guests here. I mean, that's not new to you. It is just a framework in which we all operate in, right? So again, we're not recreating the wheel. We're all hopping in, and we all have a job, and we all have a direction, and we all have somebody to report to, and we have a process that we follow. So, I mean, if we just do, again, we do this the way that we do everything else in our daily jobs, then we're okay. It's Chief Kivett can vouch for this. I know Matt Rowland can speak to this. You show up at these large events, you got to immediately tie in as quickly as you can within that system, and to try to make sure that you have ties in, let's say, with the air operations branch. So with Bradley, he's running an aviation. He runs with manned aviation, and it's so important that when you show up, that you are actually coordinating with the plastic and the metal in the sky, and that we are doing this safely. And we have good open communications, and that we know where everybody's at to prevent anything from happening, but also prevent like progress from slowing down. I mean, that's the other piece of this, is that, you want to be able to make sure that everybody's operating efficiently. So having that plan and falling into the incident management system is key.
Excellent, thank you, Coy. Now, let's talk about maybe a backup plan with that. What does that look like? Matt, maybe you could answer to us on this.
a backup plan to the
Yeah, like when you're starting to develop maybe a plan for these large events and so on, what is there a backup to things like what does this look like?
So, one of the things I wanted to say before this question was we do a lot of training as well, 3 days a month. We train with other folks. So, with what they said, as far as having those plans laid into place, that's really good to be ahead, know who you're working with, know what kind of a response you're going to get. We do in our pre-planning, we have radio comms. We'll have a whole list of radio comms of who's on what channel. So we're not all on the same channel when it comes to talking to other people on other teams. A lot of times it's just the drone team on one channel. All that filters through either dispatch or an EOC type of place. But there'll be a list. So if you need someone on another team and it's an emergency, you can switch over to that if you can't get through on the EOC or something like that. But we do pre-plan with all those radio channels, especially here in our county. We have like 12 TAC channels, and on a big event, you'll have 6 or 8 of those being used for different elements of the event itself, not just air ops, but within the scope of the whole event.
Great. Thank you, Matt. Now you had mentioned radios and equipment and so on. Let's go to this next point about being prepared with equipment, batteries, controllers, etc. Who would like to take this one?
So, Joe, if you don't mind, I'll hop in. I think it's a good
Yes.
segue to Matt's point from the backup plan. And so, what I found when I was with my team and now having the opportunity to work with some really large customers and on some of these large scale events like Indianapolis is, one of the backups you want to think about is network connectivity. And, again, you may come into a stadium with 50 to 100,000 people and your Verizon or T-Mobile, and I'm not calling out any particular cellular provider, that service is going to be bogged down as those cell towers get really congested. So what are the alternatives, whether it's, a band 14 on FirstNet, whatever you're doing, whether it's Starlink. Again, a lot of customers using Starlink successfully, and then I'll let Chief Kivett address this, but from my, kind of a daily hot washes with the DroneSense team on the ground out of Nashville, it sounds like the Starlink network was getting rather congested during this event as well. And so, it's just kind of layer upon layer of having a plan or a backup. And, one point I want to make very quickly is, of course, we want to get what is the point of the internet connection for somebody flying on DroneSense? We know that in order for the live stream to be fed up to the DroneSense cloud and then back down via the Magic Video link and into Operations Hub, that controller has to be connected to the internet. And, internet speed and stability is really critical. So those are just things that we want to be thinking about is, have we tested the network? Do we have the tools that we need to test the network as the event is getting ready to spool and operations are about to begin?
Yeah, I would just completely back up that point. We run with the rule that if you have 2, then you have 1. So we always try to create a backup for exactly that reason, whether it's a cradle point and a Wi-Fi puck, or if we can get access to Starlink and then still have our cradle point for exactly that reason.
Redundancy, right?
Joe, I learned recently, and again, we happened to be on site with customers a few months ago, and happened to have the team from a company called Plum Cases on site with us, and we have no business relationship with them. I just wanted to put it out. I learned something new that I didn't realize, and this may be with other providers that make these kind of mobile cradle point cases that have very advanced antennas and very long ranges compared to the small pucks or devices that we're generally using, is that in a congested environment that something like this Plum case can essentially reach out. You can map it to talk to or connect to a cell tower 30 or 40 miles away that is outside the zone of this really congested event. So you have some really positive steps that you can take to try to increase the bandwidth that you have available for that special event by having some tools like that.
So it's also all being aware of even new technology that's constantly coming out nowadays, and even more and more of this. I mean, it's when you're pre-planning, when you're developing the plan, it's looking to what's new as well. Probably even leaning on us to actually guidance on there too. Chief Kivett, there was a moment that both Coit and David were speaking to your experience here. Could you elaborate further?
Yeah, I think the Asheville event, we were challenged with the majority of the providers were down initially, and they were starting to come back up. And we got a lot of Starlinks brought in and sent in. We're talking 5, 6, 700,000 Starlinks were coming in to the event. We didn't get all of them, but all of our teams were using Starlink to provide data back to us, to provide the video. And we could see as the more Starlinks started to come in town, that it didn't seem to be enough satellite bandwidth for it. They hadn't moved some satellites around to make some magic happen. We were still able to get the connectivity. It was just a little bit lagged. But Starlink is an amazing product. If your teams don't have them, they're relatively inexpensive. You can get, they turn on and off. You don't have to have monthly plans with them. It's definitely worth it, especially the new Mini. The new Mini is fantastic. It's so small, you can carry it around. It's 6 by 6, 8, smaller than a piece of paper in terms of size. In terms of it's fantastic. That's what pretty much all of our teams were using in Asheville were the Minis. We had a couple that were still able to get through on some of our networks, Verizon, T-Mobile, AT&T. They were able to stream as well, but the key piece of equipment was the Starlink.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Well, good stuff. Now that we know some of our basic operating guidelines, I'd like to bring us into a moment where we can talk about maybe some particular use cases for certain kind of events, because, again, trying to keep them simple and not reinventing the wheel, there might be some little nuances back and forth. Slide, please. We're going to talk about music festivals. Now, I know some of our, where DroneSense is based is in Austin, Texas, and ACL and different things like that. I'd love to open this up. Coit, could you speak a little further on maybe points about music festivals?
I'm actually going to, because we have guests here, I want to punt it over to Chris, and I'll fill in. I'll back him up.
Thanks.
Chris just wrapped up Austin City Limits. Chris, you want to give us a rundown on?
Yeah. So, a lot goes into it, of the fact of where is the event going to be held? Is it inside a stadium? Is it inside a park? Or is it through a whole downtown region? So, in Austin, we have an ACO and we have South by Southwest, both very large music festivals, but both very different in how we plan for those in any fashion, just emergency response within itself. And so that just translates over into drones. ACL, it makes it a little bit easier because it's all in one spot. It's all on a footprint, even though it's a very big footprint, where you're going to be. We've pre-staged these assets before, and so it's kind of plug and play. The only thing we have that kind of varies there is, we know we're going to have power. It's always depends on what kind of connectivity do we have. Are we having issues with Verizon or FirstNet or Starlink that day? That's kind of always the variable, but it's kind of really easy to plug and play because it's in this solid footprint, and every year that footprint doesn't change. So it makes it really easy for us to maximize where our flight locations are, and we usually put that with other assets wherever law enforcement is staged or wherever staging is for our ambulances. So we know we have support, we know we have food, we know we have power, restrooms, things like that. On the flip side of that, an event like South by Southwest, it's not all in one spot. It kind of covers a downtown region where you have different bands at different venues. Some are outdoors, some are indoors, some are just in the streets themselves. And so you have a lot different deployment model with that, where it's not as easy to plug and play with our other assets for public safety, right? So a lot of that works with having good relationships with private sector folks, say, hotels or gyms or things like that, where they allow you to use the rooftop of their facility over these 2 weeks for power and to be able to launch from different locations. So we still have great connectivity. We can still see the drones. We can see what's going on, but we'll deploy smaller teams out throughout different regions of the city that we've pre-established when we pre-plan these things. And that allows us to approach it a lot differently, but also be successful. So kind of wide range of response to it, but the same goal in mind. You just have to kind of scale up or down of how many launch locations you're going to have and what you're going to need to support that.
Hey,
So
Joe.
a lot of communication there. Yes.
Yeah, I'm going to throw some props at Chris and team. So what they do, and guys, everybody on here, be listening to this, is they invite organizations from around our area. So it could be anybody here in the state, right? I mean, somebody may ring these guys, and it's cool because I mean, how often you get to go to Austin City Limits and fly drones? I mean, that's kind of an exciting thing. So Chris and team will invite people out, and then they will be on the flight line with them. They'll be helping run data. They'll be seeing the process and how it all fits together. So that's something I really highly encourage with large scale events, guys. Brad was saying that he goes in, this is months of preparation in advance. Well, that's building that team out, and that's getting people prepared for doing this. So, if you guys have events, don't keep them to yourselves. Whatever you do, don't keep them to yourselves. Open it up to others so they can come in and learn from you, and they can participate and they can help you out. It's just something that I'm so proud of these guys, and so cool to see everybody coming in to help out these events.
I've seen some of the. Go ahead. Sorry, Chris. Go ahead.
Yeah, with what Court was saying, it's a great thing for that event. Also for public safety as a whole, of us working together like that across different agencies and disciplines together, right? But also doing those things plans for the future, right? So there's going to be a time when something happens in our jurisdiction where we will not be able to fly drones to support whatever just happened, right? And we're going to need people to come in that we know and we trust and to fly for us, right? And vice versa. So doing that, reaching out, bringing people in for these events, letting them get some experience, letting us learn from their experiences as well, builds those relationships. And then so, if they need help in their jurisdiction, give me a call. We're going to come help you. And, vice versa. When something bad happens, in our area and we're going to be tasked doing other things, we're going to call for help as well. And I think that's what makes like this community as a whole just amazing to work with.
Agreed. And I
Excellent.
think, like Chris said, I mean, listen, there's no perfect operation. There's not. There's always hiccups. There's always speed bumps. There's always room for improvement. And so, on a multi-day event, listen, bring the team together at the end of the event and just do that brief hot wash. What went well? What do we need to improve upon tomorrow? Maybe a week or 2 weeks after the event, or whenever you can bring the entire, team together, everybody that collaborated and participated, is do that more formal retrospective, right? Just again, what went well? What can we improve upon? And just every iteration gets better and better. And it really is inspiring, being in a city like Austin and seeing the work that Chris and what AFD and Austin PD on these huge events. It is incredible. And again, what DroneSense can bring to that. And I know, Joe, we don't have the visual up, but one of the things that we train with on the DroneSense side to show our capabilities in Operations Hub and the mobile platform is the ability to ingest an ortho mosaic layer, right? We can bring in that custom ortho mosaic. So once all the tents are set up, you can come in, you can fly that, create that 2D output, import that imagery layer into the web and then onto the controller, but then build it out with the markers and polygons and polylines so the pilot can see everything. So there's a problem at a particular point of egress or a particular gate, then that pilot has that incredible situational awareness to be able to respond to that specific area. And seeing what Chris and their team has done, it's really inspiring. It's a great use case.
I was just going to speak to that because seeing these kind of map layers and so on, especially ACL, and seeing the build outs, it is just, it's amazing. It's super compelling with this. Well, excellent. Well, we have a couple other interesting spots to speak on. So music events, sporting events, marathons, parades, rallies, all of these. Let's go to the next slide and see if we can have a few moments to talk about sporting events. Now, I know sporting events, as we look at it, we see football, but coming, as we just mentioned, Austin, we've got F1. We've got like others and so on. I'd love to open that up to speak on.
Cool, you're
Excellent.
muted, my friend. Tripwire.
I'd like to kick it over to Brad on this one. I mean, the Austin Marathon, the Marine Corps Marathon is, I mean, that's a real event, and some of the lessons they've learned there and the way they collaborate, not only in with a lot of organizations, but in such a crazy airspace. I mean, these guys are doing some amazing work in our capital region. Brad, you got some takeaways that you want to share?
Oh, absolutely. One of the things that I know this doesn't really apply to anybody. I know that anyone in our area, we have the most restricted airspace in the country. My jurisdiction by itself, half of it is in what's known as the flight restricted zone. So think of a TFR, but it's permanent. The other, another third of my jurisdiction is in the Dulles Class B airspace. So I'm in between two Class B airports, one of which is completely enclosed in the flight restricted zone. Arlington, who we went to support on this, is completely inside the flight restricted zone. So there's a tremendous amount of what we talked about earlier, communication and pre-planning that had to go into this. But a number of the things that came out of that was, I know that they had times before this been looking at like traffic cameras, and particularly when there's medical emergencies, runners go down and whatnot, that they're trying to, and many times find where that incident is actually going on, so that they can get the right medical personnel to go in and actually help them. When we started introducing the drone programs into this marathon, it was basically a game changer. So we would have some of these reports of, in this case, medical emergencies. We can get a drone overhead and actually walk some of these medical personnel into where this is going. And in the command post, my understanding is that, yeah, they still had a lot of those traffic cameras, but all the executive level staff that was in there, their eyes are all glued to where the drones are and what we're doing to support that mission. We're all in communication with each other. The nice thing about this particular region is that most of us are on DroneSense. I don't work for DroneSense, but it's been working for my department very well. And we can all get on the same mission with multiple agencies. I think there was 5 or 6 different jurisdictions there supporting Arlington, mine being one of them. All of them all of them operating in DroneSense, all of them being able to communicate under this particular mission set.
Well, good stuff. Now, talking more about marathons. Now, are there any other the stages you would say, like other preparations you would do other than what we've already spoken about, in particular to a marathon?
Any large scale event, really. I can our situation here is going to be a little unique because our state actually has a lot more restrictions on what we're allowed to fly drones for in public safety, none of which apply to our helicopter, but we have a lot of restrictions within the state of Virginia, just what we're allowed to fly drones for. But any kind of large scale event, particularly if you think there's going to be a lot of people there and you think the traffic's going to be an issue, I would argue, yeah, you're going to want to get with your own community. Arlington did a fantastic job of getting consent from a lot of the business properties around the area to be able to get the teams in the strategic locations where they needed to be. That's a huge thing, is to make sure that your community is on board, with what you're doing, and a resource to help you out so that you're able to help out your community with that event.
Excellent. Thank you. Now, I would like to even kind of go back a slide and talk a little bit more on sporting events, because it's just such a big topic. And yes, football, but then I also think a lot of F1 and things like that in the Austin area. Chris, could you expand a little bit on maybe particular preparation for this or your perspective and such? And then we could even go into further talking about, DroneSense, we've worked with the Super Bowl and such, but we'd like to talk about this at first. So Chris, Laura.
Yes. So just recently we had obviously UT plays just about every Saturday, it seems like, home games, but which is a large scale event within itself. You have 110,000 people attending this every Saturday. Everybody tailgating before, a lot of moving pieces with traffic, with people, with vendors, with potential threats that are coming in through ARIC, things like that. So there's a lot that goes into that part, but then also, a few weeks ago, we had F1 in town at the exact same time. And so for for public safety as a whole in Austin Travis County, it was a very busy, very yes, put it nicely, very busy weekend for everybody, especially on that Saturday when, 12 miles apart from each other, you had 110,000 people in the UT Stadium, and then also 75,000 people hanging out at CODA for the events going on Saturday. So those are two large events inside themselves. And that's where all that pre-planning we were talking about with working well with other public safety agencies, as well as in bringing people in to assist, to work together, collaborate, all came to fruition because it would have been impossible from any one agency to be able to provide coverage at both of those by themselves. So we, all of our pilots have other things to do as well besides just fly drones. One of these days, I hope I get them there with that's all they do. But until that point, they have other job duties as well. And so when you have a big events like that, we had to lean on quite a few other agencies to come in and help that we train with, that we partner with. And so that all came to fruition on that weekend. So I think at one time we had 9 different agencies participating, flying these 2 events at the same time. And that's also a lot of that goes into trusting the people you work with. So Department of DPS for Texas, they were running Air Boss events at UT, myself out at CODA, and with teams sprinkled in between, and communication between those 2 events, as well as how things go in there, how are things going here, is there any, are we both seeing the same issues or not any issues, and keeping that communication open, not only with a single event, but also across the city with multiple events going on at the same time. But it was very nice to be able to, to log into DroneSense, and I could bring up feeds from both at the same time, and, kind of zoom in and out and see all the aircraft that were in the sky, supporting public safety as a whole. And, we had a great opportunity, especially out at CODA for the Formula One race when it got really, really busy. It was hot. Medical resources were really thin, and we were using the drones to clear 911 calls. So people would call for somebody in a parking lot, and we don't have anybody to send. We didn't have law enforcement to send because they're tied up, and we could very easily send a drone over there and look and there's nobody meeting that description. Or we'd get a call another location, and it's a duplicate call from somebody that was just there that we've already been picked up. We're able to fly a drone over there very quickly to realize that there's nobody there. We can cancel this 911 call. So, a lot of teamwork that goes onto it, and then also a lot of great opportunity to learn different things to do with the drones as well.
Wow. I can just imagine the amount of different things to look at and the amount of almost chaos, and finding a way to kind of manage it or make sense of it, or drone sense of it, and bring it all together in Operations Hub. That's got to be amazing to see.
I thought for sure I was going to have a stroke that week, but somehow made it through it. That's
Texas heat and all of it added to it. Yeah, good.
All of it, it went off as good as you could ask for, and that's nothing on my part. That's from everybody else that I work with, and everybody steps up and does a great job across all the agencies, and so that's what makes this work.
Awesome. Now, want to maybe take a step back here and have Coit share something with everyone here in just a moment. Is really that ACL map that we were talking about. Coit, would you be able to share everyone a little bit further of what that looks like?
Yeah, and then before we go, I think having Matt speak on.
Well, yeah, totally. Coit, why don't you work on bringing that up, Matt? In this moment, so we're talking F1. We're talking. What about the Indianapolis 500? Could you speak to that?
So this is the 3rd year that I've helped with Indy 500, and this was the first year that they invited our friends from DroneSense to come down and be a part of it. And we were able to use DroneSense. Not only this was the first year we flew drones. We've been doing some other counter UAS stuff in the past, but this was the first year we used drones to fly to actually monitor the traffic in and out. And the folks with the Indiana State Police absolutely loved being able to see the flow of traffic. But we were able to actually use DroneSense, the mobile side, as more of like instead of ATAC, we were able to use DroneSense to be able to show where things were, sector things off. It was all built by well, probably David and Coit ahead of time, to have a really nice functionality of what sectors were for what things. So if you had something come up, you could say, hey, I'm in this sector, and you immediately knew what section you are, because you're there with 300,000 of your friends, and it's Speedway, Indiana is like 4 square miles. So when you're looking for something, you need to be able to find it. So markers being placed on the phones, being able to find stuff. It was awesome. The other thing was I have no idea, 14 different agencies represented in everything that we were doing with Indy 500, maybe 20. And those of us that were on DroneSense were able to just use the shared mission code. So they didn't have to create accounts for everybody. So those that already had DroneSense jumped in on that shared mission code, and we had functionality immediately without having to do a bunch of other legwork on that end. So the ability to share amongst my DroneSense friends works out really well when it comes to large scale events.
And Joe, I know we're getting so close to time. I want to make sure Coit gets time to screen share. Last thing I wanted to piggyback on what Matt said. I want to give a shout out to a company called Critical Response Group, CRG, that did the maps for the Indianapolis 500. So again, they came in, they provided an incredible ortho mosaic, GeoTIFF, GeoPDF, I believe was the format in this case, where basically we could overlay that over the actual space that was seen on the controllers, that was seen by the folks working in mobile streaming and tracking on the ground. And that was that common operating picture. So if you're not familiar with CRG, they just do great work, and we really recommend looking into them as well. And Coit, you've got it up, so I'm gonna give the floor to you.
Yeah, guys. Hey, super quick. I know we're short. So this is an ortho mosaic, right? This is just us taking a bunch of different pictures, putting those pictures together, stitching them so we have an image that is consistent with the event that we're going to be working. So I mean, you guys can see this is not too bad for detail. This is Pix 4D React. So it was super quick to be able to build this out. So what we can do is we can take this, overlay this on top of a map, and then this shows up on your personal devices. It shows up on your remote controls, your mobile devices. And then what we can do on top of this to make sure that we coordinate everything, and this is what everybody's been saying, is that we could come in and then turn on these different layers, right? So this is a really good way for us to be able to see where everyone's at. So LZ Bravo, that was the fire department's. Alpha was the PD and friends. And then Charlie over here is EMS. And this is how, this is a map that we can all use. So if you've got somebody that just fell out at El Patio, okay, where's that at? Well, we all have these on our maps, on our devices. So we can drop markers on top of this to say, hey, this is your point of interest you need to go fly to. We just had heavy migration of folks running to the emergency egress number 2. Well, where is that on my map? Well, we have that already written out here. So great way to keep us from the airspace safe. So as you're seeing people flying around here, and if Chris Lester was working with Matt Rowland, and Matt had Brad there, and Brad had Chief Kivett there, we would all be able to work with each other and say, hey, these are the altitudes we're calling out. So your ceiling is 200 feet, your floor, blah, blah, blah. And we can all operate safely over this common operating picture. And we can very quickly, work as a team. So this just makes us it's faster and more efficient. All right, with that, I'm going to stop sharing, and I know we're going to be wrapping this up.
Well, hey, yes, thank you so much for showing that, Coit. And again, that is one of the most compelling things here on seeing it. Now, at the very end, we do have a question that popped up, and I'd love to answer this live, pose it. So are the communications similar to ATAC? Coming from John, open that up to my team.
Communication similar to ATAC. Can we go further with that just so we understand?
Well, let's talk about maybe the communication like internally and so on. What would it look like? How using DroneSense, using ATAC, what would it look like there?
Well, I'm trying to understand the question. So I guess, John, just high level overview is, yes, this is very similar to ATAC, where we all operate off the same operating picture, the common operating picture, right? We can drop markers. You can drop markers on TAC. You can drop markers on DroneSense. We do have the ability through our API to be able to pump in information into TAC. It's one way right now, but in the future, we're going to have this going both ways. It's bi-directional. So you're going to see here in the future us being able to tie directly into TAC. TAC is, has individual servers. This is built off the DroneSense server group. So there are some differences and some real benefits to both systems.
Excellent. Thank you, Coit. We have a question coming in right now. Are agencies open to sharing their SOPs for large events? Who would be a good contact to reach out regarding this?
Yep. So I just saw that pop up as well, Joe. I will go ahead and drop my email into the chat. So anybody on the call, please feel free to email me directly. We'll make sure you get what you need. Certain things like, again, this is a community, there's collaboration. I know Chris, I know, Coit, any of the folks on this call would be more than happy to share their incident action plans, any documentation that they have built and assembled over the years for special events. Again, truly a community, and we just want to collaborate and help.
Excellent. Well, good stuff. Well, David will be dropping his email there, and as well as Coit to follow up with any and all questions when it coming to that. Now, we are wrapping up on time, and I know everyone always has a lot going on throughout the day, so we kind of close this off at this moment. But again, just want to say thank you for everyone attending this webinar. We have a lot to talk about here, and it sounds like we need to even expand on further because there's so much to cover. But I really just want to give a big shout out to our guests here today on speaking of it, from Chief Kivett to Matt Rowland to Bradley Willen to Chris Lester. Thank you so much for being here today and being able to speak on it.
No problem.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you guys for having me.
Thanks, everyone.